All right, let's get to North Melbourne versus Collingwood. Controversy at the end of this game. We'll get there in a few moments' time. But, Jimmy, it was the sixth game decided by 5 points or less for Collingwood this year, and they're yet to lose one.
An absolute cracker. I love the way North Melbourne spoke all week. They thought Collingwood were gettable, especially with all their injuries. So a great positive attitude from North coming off their win. That man, Wardlaw, or the Warlord, he's becoming a fan favourite, especially for Kangaroos fans. I think a lot of neutrals love watching him. Paul Curtis, lively on the forward line. He kicked one early. Wardlaw had 22 and a goal in the first half. Luke Davies-Uniacke, 21 in the first half. Bobby Hill with potentially the mark of the year. Dacos got better and better as the game went on, especially when his tagger got subbed out of the game. Nick Larkey kicked 4 in the first quarter. And Dacos, again, just when the game needed someone to run and carry, especially in the second half, he was just relentless. And how he got thrown forward after being back for quite some time, kicked a goal. Bobby, as I mentioned, who took mark of the year, I think 5 goals. Lockie Schultz, best game for the Pies with 4 goals. Bryn Teakle in his first game for the Kangaroos after being a mid-season draft pick, obviously started his career at Port Adelaide, kicked a little Joe the Goose over the top. This turnover was so costly. Fisher tried to find one in amongst all the trees there, resulted in a turnover, and Bobby Hill again with another fantastic mark. Brave contested grab there, pops that through, which gives Collingwood the lead, gentlemen. And it just was relentless. I think this kick by Hoskin Elliott was unbelievably brave, but the mark from Harvey Harrison was something out of this world. Tucker tries to swing this one through, doesn't get a score. We have another stoppage, and Fisher, who bobs up a little bit later here, has a chance from having the turnover that cost him a goal to kicking the match winner. When you're looking at umpire D-Rod, you thought it was through, and then he's just tapped the chest on a point, and the siren goes. But as you mentioned, Tom, a lot of decisions that will be looked at over the course of the week.
So what a rollercoaster league. Collingwood last year's premiers against North Melbourne, bottom of the ladder. Who would have thought?
Well, at 54 points behind, they always were going to come hard. They looked very tired late in the game, North Melbourne. And to be honest, they choked a little bit, to use that term, because all of a sudden they tightened up.
You could see that, couldn't you?
You could see it happening, in that final term, really. And but they still had the last shot at goal. They could have had a chance, could have won it, but they couldn't. But they're just amazing, Collingwood, how they keep finding a way to win these games, even though they've got sort of deficits to make up.
And it was the 6th biggest comeback in VFL, AFL history. So credit must go to the Pies. This is what both coaches had to say after the match.
They'll look at it at their own game. And say, this is why we got back into the contest. But some of the things that they were doing, it was just like a Russian roulette of whether it was going to come off or not.
Like when the scoreboard's against you, you've got to take more risks. So then that provides opportunities to turn the ball over. We do have method in that, though. I don't think we just go and make it up.
All right, let's get into the heats. And my first one this evening, gents, is for Alistair Clarkson, who subbed Will Phillips out of the game when he was doing a fantastic job on Nick Dacos, and he brought Liam Shields into the match. Talk us through the mind of the master coach here, Lee.
Well, he must have thought his fella was fading. I mean, that's the only reason. You wouldn't have thought you're going to make the change unless you thought we just needed to, because he's running out of legs. As it turns out, Liam Shields maybe had the leg but didn't have the speed. So, as Craig McRae said, when Collingwood were just rushing it forward, hand passes over there, get it forward, it was just a charge off halfback when Collingwood got the ball. So, I don't know whether he would have been able to keep up with him in the final term, because when Dacos has got the ball on the halfback and the ball gets at half ball, guess who bobs up? Yeah. He's there.
Alistair Clarkson, this was him describing why he made that change post-match.
Yeah, he was doing a good job, but we had the freshness of the sub, and we were starting to fatigue a little bit, and we just thought the freshness of the sub, Liam Shields going to try and finish that job off. When you don't win and you sit there and say, oh geez, was that pivotal? I don't think it was pivotal in terms of the final result.
Yeah, I think most people disagree because of how well the young man was doing on Dacos. My heat this week, Tom, is Weekend at McBurney's. Obviously, remember the great movie Weekend at Bernie's? Obviously, Steve McBurney, he's had a big week. He's going to have a bigger week this week, of course, with some decisions which we'll get into. And these are the 3 big ones that we plucked out of this. It's the ball was kicked off the ground now. You can forgive the umpire trying to work it out. But 2 players there, McCreary and Sideball, came steaming over the mark. It should have been a 50-metre penalty. That's as basic as it gets. Should have been a 50-metre penalty. people say, well, Scott played on. Well, he played on because he didn't hear anything from the umpires. We'll go on to the next...
Can we just see that one again? Because I just can't understand how that's not a 50-metre penalty, given some of the decisions we've seen this year, which are so technical and so touchwood.
You only have
the
to go...
mark's taken, Leigh.
That's a clanger. That is an umpiring clanger because the two Collingwood players ran over the mark and really just played on, so he had no choice. That should have been a 15-metre... I mean, most umpiring calls are judgment calls. Every now and again, rarely, they make a clanger. I think that one is a clanger.
You got 4 umpires and the umpire in the ear, so you missed one there. I'm with Leigh.
The umpire in the ear?
Yeah, no, but he's only giving encouragement. He would have been giving encouragement with that one. Might have given encouragement to probably pay a free kick here against Nick Dacos, but he didn't. He takes the tackle on, sidestep. He claims he handballed it. When you have a look at the reverse angle, his hand actually hits into his other hand. You've probably seen a lot being pinged holding the ball in recent weeks since the tightening of the interpretation. Missed throws, 2 there in a row. Side bottom, you can forgive the umpire being in crowd.
He made an attempt.
That's a throw.
He made an attempt. If you make an attempt without prior opportunity, that's not considered a free kick.
You want to have a try at Quainers then?
Yeah, have a look at Quainers.
You cannot throw the ball over your shoulder.
No. Oh, well, they traditionally haven't been paying them this year because when you make an attempt without prior opportunity, and that's what frustrates fans.
But there was no one tackling. There was no one tackling Quainer.
Yeah, that is a throw.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Look where the umpire's standing right behind him. That's a line out in rugby union.
It's interesting. You don't think what's the technical part of a handball is you've got to hit the ball off the platform hand, right?
Yeah.
But the platform hand can move, but it has to be forced off by the physio. That's the rule, isn't it, Jimmy?
Yep.
But some of them are absolutely testing that theory. They're really going like that.
And here's one that frustrates me the most. We get told all goals get reviewed. Well, they don't. Have a look at this one. Bailey Scott, he smothers the ball there. Hands go straight up. Jack Chris, a good snap to actually generate that amount of power when it's been smothered. You see the fingers clearly go back. We saw in other games this week where some are reviewed. Why wasn't that brought back? That was clear. Speaking to people who came into our office beforehand who were at the game, they could see it on the big screen. The first replay, they went, that's
conclusive.
touch.
That's conclusive.
Yep.
So I've spoken to the AFL this evening and they've just said we'll look at these more closely tomorrow. Steve McBurney, the rest of the footy team with Laura Kane. What do you want from them, Jimmy?
No, I'll tell you what will come out. We've reviewed it. We're happy with the process. We've ticked it all off. Can you tell me which one of the words of that statement I got wrong?
But do we want the clarification? OK, we've just looked at 3 or 4, and really, it's one of the byproducts, of equalisation, I reckon. There's a lot of close finishes, and therefore there's a lot of iffy free kicks throughout the game.
Well, let's have a look at this list, which is being compiled by Jared Waitley on SEN this week. There's actually 10 decisions late in games this year which have swayed the match to varying degrees. And if you look down that list, you'll probably remember most of them if you're keen footy fans like we are. And a lot of them are controversial. And I'm just wondering, Leigh, why has this happened this year? I can't remember a year where so many late calls have played such pivotal roles in deciding games.
Well, I wonder what is a byproduct of close games. So if it's a close game and a decision, and I reckon, like, umpiring to me, the umpire blows a whistle, I think, if he thinks it's maybe 90% of free. Maybe not 100, but 90%. Yeah. But there's so many technical judgment-type calls, and because we're in full-time footy now for this era, where the coaches and players are rorting the rules, the umpires have to be really technical. They're playing 50-metre penalties now for things you say, that shouldn't be 50 metres, but they have to, because they have to be technical, otherwise the players and coaches will rort the rules. But what's created is a whole lot of confusion, I reckon. When I watch a holding the ball decision now, I think, oh, yeah, OK. I'm not sure whether it should be or shouldn't be.
And if you don't know,
I'm only an observer.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is there's such a judgment call in most of these highly technical umpiring situations, but then you get that 50-metre penalty that wasn't paid. Yeah. Well, that's just a clanger. And that's
pretty important clanger. North Melbourne fans tonight are frustrated about that, and rightly so, because that is a clear 50-metre penalty. All right, let's move on to GWS versus Port Adelaide today. Your Giants had a great win, Jimmy. The margin at the end of this one was 22 points, and it was Port Adelaide's midfield that was shut down superbly, and an unlikely tagger in there as well in Toby Bedford, Leigh.
It was. Well, this was completely different to the Collingwood-North Melbourne game, where I'm trying to think of the goals. There was 37 goals kicked in the afternoon game, 15 goals goals kicked in this game. They jumped out of the blocks, Port. They kicked the first 3 goals, or the only 3 goals of the first term. Callum Brown ended up getting a couple of goals. But then from about half-time onwards, even though the game was really inaccurate, not a whole lot of excitement because it was like behind after behind. Toby Green had kicked 5 behinds. Eventually he kicked 1 to get the 1 goal on the board. So for most of the game, they were 2 or 3 goals in front. Second half, the Giants, and they maintained that margin, and then eventually Toby Green got hold of 1 late in the game, kicked the ball across his body, and he was probably the player on the ground with ball in hand and a bit of space, looked the most dangerous.
1 goal 5 though, didn't he?
No, Toby Green did.
Toby Green did, yeah.
No, I'm talking about Josh Kelly. Sorry.
Oh, Josh Kelly.
Josh Kelly, yeah. No, he kicked probably that ceiling goal, and he was very classy with ball in hand. But in terms of like couldn't hit the side of a barn in this game.
You must have been happy, Jimmy, given what you said about the Giants last week. Port Adelaide, on the other hand, well, they failed another test, and they continue to fail tests when they're given an opportunity. If they'd won this game, they would have been second on the ladder. Instead, they're 7th, and this was Ken Hinkley after the match.
Giants run with the ball better than we did. You know, we know, and everyone talks about it. They talk about it themselves. The Giants tsunami, which is the way they play their footy. They're an aggressive attacking team who, can play some really scintillating football when you let them. I don't know that either team played that for long periods tonight, but they get the win. I'm sure they're happy.
Leigh, in the first episode this year, I predicted Port to win the flag, and I'm trying to stay with them, but they're a long way off it, specifically because when their best 3 get shut down, they look like a shell of a team, and that's exactly what happened this afternoon.
Yeah, we're talking Rosie, Butters, Horn-Francis, and even Ollie Wines has been pretty good this year. They had sort of below average games, really, and they need to have really super games. I mean, the best games, either Rosie or Butters have been really good on the games where Port Adelaide have been able to win. So still the home state, but you go up to the Giants, you think the Giants are probably going to beat a Port Adelaide. If it was in Adelaide, you might think the result might be reversed, but certainly they need that core midfield group to be really, really dominant.
Toby Bedford into the midfield to tag was a stroke of genius from Adam Kingsley, Jimmy. Yeah,
you've got to weigh up normally, is it Butters, Rosie or Horn-Francis? It probably went Butters because Rosie's coming off the back of an injury, so you're thinking he might be a little bit rusty, and Horn-Francis's ability probably to stay forward a bit longer, you could lose that matchup. But I think just having physical contact on those guys who love to break out through the front and the stoppage, and Bedford's got the engine to go with someone like Butters, so it worked well this week.
And Butters had 17 disposals, which was his lowest return for 2 years.